Hello, everyone.
green room.
Apologies for the technical difficulties there. Gave you all just a little bit longer intermission, so hopefully you're able to grab a bite or some coffee. But we have another awesome session lined up for you here, How to Sell in a Down Economy. Kristy LaPlante, excuse me, and please correct my pronunciation if that was incorrect, will be your host for today and moderator. I'm going to let them take it away so that I am not eating up the airtime. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michael. That was perfect pronunciation as well. So thank you for that. Welcome, everybody, to this session about selling and really just staying focused on growth during an economic downturn. And I don't want to focus on the negative here by any means. So I'll start with this. There's this saying I love, which is, be the buffalo, charge the storm. It is credited to a bunch of different sources. I don't know who actually originally said it, but it's the reflection of this fact that buffaloes in the wild, when they're faced with a storm on the horizon, will actually charge straight into that storm head on, where most animals and humans would run away. And it's as though the buffalo knows that the fastest way around a storm is actually through it. And I bring up this quote right now because I want all of us here today to be buffaloes and to charge the storm. The storm, of course, being the unfortunate inevitability of economic recovery that is almost certain to follow this time of quarantine that we're all in. So rather than panic and worry about that, we invited some fellow buffaloes and storm chargers to today's session to share their perspectives with you on how to make it through this time and on how we navigate the second half of this year. So today I'm joined by three incredible and diverse minds. First up is Kanur Patel. Give us a wave, Kanur. Kanur leads the CPG team at Twitter. She's based in Chicago. She advises marketers from some of the world's top CPG brands like Nestle, Kraft Heinz, Mars Wrigley, probably several more that I'm not even remembering right now. She started working at Twitter in New York, advising brands on content strategies, and prior to that was a reporter for Ad Age. So in all, she's been working in this space for over 15 years. So welcome, Kanur. We're also joined today by Alison Mcentee. Allison has been in sales for 18 years and works for Some Spider Family, which is a media and entertainment company that's focused on building identity-based brands. And really fun fact, Allison is also the author of a book called Little Black Book, Asking for Money. So welcome, Allison. And last but not least, we are joined by Matt Green. Matt is the Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder of Sales Assembly and VentureScale. And he's based out of Chicago also. Matt's primary clientele includes some of the world's top B2B and tech companies, Sprout Social, G2, ActiveCampaign, Jellyvision, just to name a couple. And in a past life, which is really interesting for today's topic, Matt worked in a private equity and investment banking for JP Morgan and American Express, and specifically during the 08-09 financial crisis. So we're looking forward to your perspective here on that, Matt. So I want to kick this session off by having each of you answer the following question. And Kanur, I'm going to start with you on purpose because of your CPG background. And I personally know the struggle is real in CPG right now because they haven't been able to buy toilet paper in at least a month and a half. So that said, I'm sure a lot of people are in that boat right now. Kanur, what do you see happening with your customers and your clients today when it comes to them spending or investing money in their businesses?
Yeah, I mean, the CPG industry, what's great about this industry is we're all feeling it in our day-to-day lives. Like you said, some products are not at shelf right now. Those are the things that people are stocking up on. So shelf-stable foods, personal goods, paper goods, toilet paper is the famous example. Also, we're seeing some CPG advertisers have disruptions in their supply chains. So given that this is a global issue global stay-at-home orders, you can imagine that this affects sourcing, factories, etc. And then lastly, some products aren't selling anymore. So you think about changing consumer behaviors. People aren't going to the 7-Elevens and convenience stores and gas stations. So you think about those impulse buys that you might grab at checkout or grab from a cold case that just aren't happening. And so when you have brands in varying stages of disruption, that of course affects their ad spend, right? Are you going to spend on brands that aren't at shelf, right? If most ad spending is to drive sales at shelf, and if there's nothing there, are they going to be investing that way? We see some brands shifting to more brand advertising and more about building equity. And then we see others having to shift their plans given that a lot of live events, sports, et cetera, are canceled, right? There's a lot of adjacency in advertising where people want to surround live events, including sports. And so I'd say overall the ad industry is scrambling. And you can see that, of course, in all the headlines and news, trying to figure out what does this new world mean for me and how do I move forward? Absolutely. And you're seeing that with your clients directly too, right? Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Allison and Matt, are you seeing something similar in your respective industries?
Go ahead, Allison. Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, no, I pick up. I sell content. I'm on the publisher side. So we're seeing, every publisher is different, but for us, thankfully, we're seeing partners pausing and shifting, kind of break for a moment and kind of thinking about what they want to do. We haven't, thank God, seen massive like our friends in news and sports and the guys that are selling the Olympics, things like that. So, thankfully, I think what we're seeing is, brands wanting to pause, shift a little bit back. Brands are already planning for back half. Our market really vibrant, that everyone's just pausing and nothing's happening. I think people are trying to push the pedal, especially on back half initiatives. And there are a few parts that do want to play in the current conversation, and they want to do it right. They want thoughtfully. Like Kunar said, there are brand dollars going to the publisher side because they want to be part of this equity and part of the need that people are looking for. So I'd say it's a moment. It's not, for us, and at least for the publisher side, I can feel that it's not, a complete downturn. I think just people are really nervous and want to make the right moves.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like even in both of those cases in slightly different industries, there's a lot of kind of pausing and waiting, not really a full willingness yet to just pull a plug in, and that's a great sign, right? But just kind of a wait and see mentality. Matt, are you seeing the same thing as well? I know you work with a lot of big tech companies.
Yeah, we're seeing some pretty consistent things across the board, and just for context, I come from not only my personal experience, but the experience of around 125 different companies, as was mentioned before, that that we're fortunate enough to work with. And Allison mentioned some a moment ago that I really want to hone in on, which is she mentioned this one simple word, which was need. Right. It seems like the companies in our community that have not only been able to, not only tread water over the past couple of weeks, but in a sense have been able to thrive. They've been an organization that's providing some sort of a solution that is either a very definitive need in this current environment, or at the very least something that their sales and their marketing team have been able to position as a need in this current time. And I think that's one of the things that, I'd ask everyone that's listening in to really take away, is that chances are, if you are a big believer in your product or your service, which I presume that you probably are, seeing as how you're working for the organization that's selling it, I would focus less on looking at the macro level, the overall, oh my God, things are really bad and more COVID cases and recession, and is it going to be a V-shaped recovery or U-shaped recovery, and focus more on just drilling down to the basics and say, okay, how do we communicate with our potential buyers that what we're providing is needed right now? And doubling down on that, keeping in mind the fact that we may not be selling to our traditional decision maker. Companies across the board are reining in their budgets, and as an end result, the ultimate decision maker 9 times out of 10 is going to be the CFO, right? Which for a lot of folks in the audience, they may have never directly sold into a CFO before. It's an entirely different conversation to have than selling into a head of IT, a head of sales, a head of marketing, so on and so forth.
Just being more focused on the kind of bottom line aspect, right?
Yeah, it will focus less on here's how we could make you and your company and your organization grow right now. That messaging doesn't seem to resonate, at least in the limited experience that our community has so far. Focus more on how can we improve efficiencies within your business? How can we make sure that your team members are more effective at what they do? That tends to be a messaging that, in a broad sense, is resonating more over the past couple weeks.
Interesting. And Matt, you were, we spoke right before this, and you mentioned that you were part of a pretty big study that covered a lot of these kinds of topics, or at least touched on this. Would you care to elaborate on what that study entailed and what you discovered?
Sure. Yeah. So what we did over the past couple weeks is we circulated an anonymous survey to the heads of sales and heads of marketing of the companies that we work with, which, as was mentioned before, include Chicago born and bred companies like Sprout Social and G2, but also larger organizations like LinkedIn and Upwork and Glassdoor. And we asked a series of pretty general questions around how the current environment is impacting your sales strategy, your team, your organization, specifically from a sales and revenue perspective. And, we were able to identify some pretty interesting themes across the board. First of all, you do have companies, a good amount of companies that are taking their entire Q2 forecast, or in some cases, their entire 2020 forecast. They're just throwing it out the window. They're saying, okay, well, all this stuff isn't relevant anymore. But at the same time, you do have, I'd say, a good 30 to 40% of the companies in our community that aren't running with that type of approach. So they do still feel confident that, hey, yeah, the situation is terrible. It hit us all like a ton of bricks out of nowhere. But we're confident enough in our ability to adjust our messaging, to adjust our sales approach in order to make the best of a bad situation.
Interesting. That's really interesting to see how people are adjusting. Kunor and Allison, I'd be really interested too, from your perspectives, that if you've seen with your clients and customers that are they starting to change their approaches as well? Are you seeing any differences similarly in behaviors or patterns?
Go ahead, Kunor.
Yeah, I'd say definitely. I'd echo. I think everyone right now is changing their behaviors, right? I mean, our whole lives are different and our jobs are different. I really like what you said about, thinking of getting back to basics. One thing we've been doing is really focusing on relationships and making sure we're making human connections and asking about how people are doing. And that might not mean talking about products or services at all in that first meeting, simply because everyone right now needs the strength of relationship to power us through. And while people are confused and pulling back right now, our clients included, they're going to move beyond that. And when they do, those relationships are going to take us forward.
I love that. Allison, maybe I think you had something to add as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add, from a direct seller's perspective, you've always got to balance the agency and the client relationship there and make the right moves. I would say, right now I am working heavier on the client side. I think agencies themselves also add a question here in terms of where they're going to play and how they interact with clients. So I have had actually more success going straight to client directly, especially seeing them in the press and what they're doing about this, you know, acknowledging those efforts that they're in, you know, what trying to help, and being a source of help for them and how to even get a message pushed farther. So I have been successful going to clients more so than I would if we were, you know, 6 months ago, which is interesting. I don't know if clients are, you know, maybe taking in the reins more, just like Matt said, you know, there are more people, more eyeballs looking at whatever they are going to be spending. So maybe things are tighter client side than they were before.
Interesting. That's super interesting. I mean, it sounds like there's so much anxiety, which kind of makes me feel better because I'm feeling anxiety about it. And I joke with people I talk to, I just want to give someone a hug right now. I don't care if I work with them or not. So when it comes to this economic storm that's on the horizon, it sounds like a lot of industries and a lot of people who work in different industries are just really feeling that. I want to direct our attention quickly to this question. We don't have an official Q&A, so thank you, attendees, for participating in the Q&A. This just seems really relevant to me, and I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on it. A guest asked, how do you start the relationship conversation? I've seen a ton of emails that say the same thing, checking in during these crazy times, etc. So do you have any kind of, from what you've lived through too and what you're experiencing, any recommendations on how to start that kind of, Kenora, what you were calling the relationship conversation instead of the sales conversation? Any tips there?
Yeah. I have very tiny people running around upstairs, which is why I keep muting my mic. So I think what we're trying to do, Twitter is one of the largest focus groups in the world. Most of the conversation on our platform is public, and there's some really interesting insights coming out of that conversation right now on how things are changing, what conversations are up and down, et cetera. And so we're trying to start conversations there. So, you know, there's two groups of clients, those that we already know well, which it's much easier to make that phone call and say, how are you doing? What's your situation? I know enough about your life to ask about what's going on with you. What are you juggling? What are you balancing? How is your family? But then for those new relationships, we're trying to lead with consultation. So surfacing an insight that might be interesting to them. So checking in, would love to jump on the phone to hear how you're doing. I also wanted to share that the gaming conversation is up on our platform 4x because we know that this might matter to your brands, or this is exactly the kind of product that people are consuming while they're gaming or having virtual happy hours, or all of the things we know are happening in the world today that we can back up with our data.
Interesting. That's really interesting, in like detecting those patterns now, and especially with Twitter as the world's largest focus group. That's pretty cool. Allison, it kind of reminds me too, you'd mentioned to me earlier that you're also experiencing the direct effects of this kind of potential downturn via the less selling part of your job, but really more the consulting, content director kind of part of your job as a direct contributor. So I know several folks who are attending today are probably also in that boat and feeling that specific weight also. Do you have what are your concerns in that role right now? And do you have any perspective to share on how they can wade through that?
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of the marketplace, I know as a seller that I've got to attach myself to revenue. I know, I've been through lots of different moments, recession, 9/11, things like that. So I know that, when companies do look at furloughing or, downsizing, if you can attach yourself to driving revenue into that company, you're safer than someone that didn't. It's not, a foolproof plan, but I would say that, if they are going to be cutting people, they're not going to be cutting at the first go the people that are driving revenue into the company. So and for me, what helps me is to get that singular focus. So all I know every day is, of course, I've got, the kids that I have to homeschool and the husband that has his 8 calls a day and balancing and trying to figure all this out. But I know all I need to do is to drive revenue. I need to sell something. And it could be, it doesn't have to be 7 figures, it has to just be a plus sign. And if I can show that I can at least show the hustle, I'm getting intel from the marketplace, I'm updating my manager almost hourly what I'm hearing, even, you know, like what we're talking about today, and being that source of intel and just being also a pusher internally to challenge the team on what are those proactive ideas. So it's, you know, for me as a seller, I know I need to sell something. I need to be on the board in this moment. And that's just, that's every day is all my focal point is.
Just heads down.
So that's, you know, that's what, yeah, it really, I mean, and like our said is, you know, providing a source of intel for a partner. So you're not just checking in, or you know them or not. You're not just saying, hi, how are you? Can we help you? You've got to provide some sort of value to them. You have to say, seeing this uptick in traffic in this specific area, and I have an idea for you. How about this? One-liner, does it resonate with you? Let's hop on the phone. You can't just send, you know, just checking in emails, like that's going to be deleted. So like that's not going to be looked at. So I would just, you know, it's all about providing value, being quick. There's no room right now for massive process and, you know, the rigor of the typical RFP. If you're a seller that's showing proactive insights and ideas and you can act fast, you're not, you know, being a greedy gut, then you're in play. I would feel that would be my gut.
Yeah. So. No, and that's really interesting. It kind of reminds me, Matt, to what you just spoke about too. You know, when you just mentioned kind of, and actually that we talked about a little bit beforehand also, but when you were talking about messaging, and I think we all kind of agreed before we jumped on this panel that we're starting to see this inundation of messaging, and yes, it's important. It's kind of this balance, right? Because it's like you said, Allison, it's trying to address that elephant of the room of we need to, like, we have a bottom line and we need to thrive in this scenario, each of us. But then Matt, that reminds me of your comment earlier of, but at the same time, you know, that the messaging we're using to do that might be a little bit much, I guess.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all getting it, right? And I think everybody who's attending this, you know, I can tell you right now, do not, if you friend me on LinkedIn, that's great, attendees, but do not email me on there. I have so many emails in there right now from the past 2 weeks that I couldn't begin, and in mails, I couldn't begin to sift through that. And I just don't. So, Matt, what do you think is happening there, and what do you think should be happening?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. Yes, to respond directly to the guest question, checking in during these crazy times. I hope you and your family are well. I mean, I've had more strangers check in on me over the past week than my parents have checked in on me in like a year, which, you know, that's a different conversation. But, you know, to Allison's point, you know, I do want to put an exclamation point on the idea that you do have to provide value. I would also go a step further and circle back to something that you said, Kristy, to, you know, at the beginning of this conversation, how you feel like you need a hug, right? You just want to hug anybody.
Including you. Watch out, Chicago.
Exactly. I mean, that is what anybody that you're trying to sell to, they are the silver lining of this situation that we're all in is we all entered it in the same way at the exact same time. So we're all going through the same emotional journey together. Right? You know, Kristy needs a hug from a stranger right now. Anybody that you're trying to sell to is probably feeling some sense of the same thing, right? So it's not only in reaching out, not being lazy, you know, checking in during these crazy times is the new, I just wanted to follow up, right? That's just laziness, right? Focus on providing value, but open with some sort of way to forge a human connection. Right. You know, is mentioned a couple times, you know, hey, you know, we have kids running around upstairs. If I saw a recap of this panel discussion on LinkedIn on a quick video, and I heard that, you know, when reaching out to either one of the two panelists, you know, I would say, hey, you know, first I got to say, you know, I noticed you on this panel. I have a 7-year-old. Here are some resources that have kept him busy and engaged during this time because, you know, I'm a part-time second grade teacher now, too. That being said, then you lead in to provide the value, right? You know, that's going to be much more effective. Trying to forge that human connection from the very beginning is going to be much more effective than, hey, wow, you know, I hope you and your family are well right now, right? Yeah, so I don't know if that's the direction that you wanted me to go, but I just get really passionate about laziness in sales, and hey, just checking in, that's laziness, right? Go a step further like you would even before this whole thing happened. Do a little bit of research, try to individualize your outreach and not just keep it general. And that's what we're seeing right now, to answer your question, Kristy. It's just this race to, oh my God, we can't do marketing events, we can't do conferences, all these other marketing strategies don't work, or we physically can't do them. So what do? Let's just spam people LinkedIn messages and emails and webinar invites, 99% of them starting with, hey, I hope you and your family are making it through this crazy time together.
Yeah, and I think it's such an interesting effect, right? That the emotional and the human kind of element and the human connection is more pronounced, not less, when we're in that kind of environment. Kenora, I'd like to pop that back over to you as well. I just think you have such an interesting perspective in Twitter, not just from these huge brands that you work with, but also in the kind of Twitterverse and your users base. What are you seeing? Do you have any advice maybe, or any patterns you're seeing, anything cool or interesting in terms of helping people stay positive and focused on the positive during this time?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think what I'm really relying on is new ways to communicate as a team with external people as well as internal people. So, you know, my team is distributed. We have folks in Chicago, New York, Austin, and everyone used to be on the road all the time. So internally now we're doing these daily scrums, as we're calling them, and they're just 30 minutes. Everyone goes around the horn and talks about what's going on. And that sort of sharing is helping keep people positive, because you're hearing the wins from entirely different books of business, different markets. And I'm also finding that positivity is coming from different types of connections. So, you know, surfacing what we can send to our clients, handwritten notes to clients, hosting virtual happy hours or game nights to connect with them. And so constraint inspires creativity, and the more that we can surface that creativity for what people are doing, consumers are doing, back to our brands to show that, like, yes, your products are being used, but in a very different way, right? We're not going to be doing tailgating content anymore. That's not the focus, but you know, we see that this is what consumers are doing on our platform. I want to show this to you, but thinking about that across the board of changing how we communicate internally to keep internal teams motivated, as well as externally with our clients, and having different touch points. We're not doing happy hours anymore for lots of reasons.
Right.
So
are you doing virtual happy hours with your clients?
We are. We are doing virtual happy hours with our clients.
That's perfect. Anybody else? Allison, Matt, do you guys do that?
I mean, I would, one idea that I'm blatantly
I haven't done it.
stealing from.
Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
An idea that I'll blatantly steal from one of our members is not only doing a virtual happy hour, but building in some level of interactivity. What that means in practice is having a bartender put together a recipe for a drink, distributing that recipe to whoever's invited to the virtual happy hour, maybe 3 or 4 days in advance. And then when you show up to the virtual happy hour, everyone has their own bespoke drink made from the same recipe. And they have, you know, a good laugh about, hey, this one turned out terrible. And hey, you know, I added extra vodka or tequila into mine, you know, ha ha ha. Just, you know, some way to make it a little bit more engaging. And again, going back to the entire concept of fostering human connections, especially in a virtual environment, just adding those little bells and whistles, I think, is key.
Yeah. What's your favorite drink so far with clients?
It's anything with bourbon in it.
Anything, it's perfect. Stronger the better right now, Matt. So you're on the right track. Allison, how about you? What are you doing?
I love the idea of virtual cocktail hours. That's great. What I've done is I've sent dinner to clients that I know have families that, you know, I don't know about you guys. I make 3 meals a day and it's exhausting and I hate it. So, you know, I feel like sending a meal, you know, DoorDash or whatever, to a partner that's invested in you, with this, knowing they have a family to feed, I think is a nice way to go. But I haven't done virtual happy hours. I think that's a great idea. I love it.
These are all great ideas. I love this. I love this. I do want to keep us kind of on track for a couple more minutes though. And I know these are really cool activities. Hopefully people are getting good ideas. These are probably some strategies, honestly, that could be used in a selling perspective too, even to complete prospects. So I think that's really interesting and really creative. And they do say that necessity is the mother of invention. So that's probably a little bit of what's going on here as well. Allison, before we get too far away from it, though, I did really want to ask you today, from a content specific perspective, because that is your area of expertise. Do you see anything specifically, not in that interactive chat space, but in the content space, playing out, or any recommendations or anything you've seen work well or maybe not work well when it comes to content specifically?
Yeah, well, you know, what I can tell you is even the partners that are planning for, you know, midsummer to 3Q, we always ask the questions, do you know, in terms of content ideation, do you want to touch on Corona, you know, within the creative? You know, if it's, you know, if it's a back to school initiative, for example, are we talking about going back to school? Are we really going back to school? You know, so, you know, in terms of the ideation, it's absolutely part of the conversation. Most of the partners to make some sort of nod and recognition to, you know, to the new normal or whatever we're calling this. So it's infiltrated through it. In terms of sales, I mean, you know, going back to what we originally talked about, there are brands that, you know, and categories that may not have, you know, thought about working with us from an awareness standpoint. Maybe they were, you know, highly, you know, programmatic or very efficiency driven, but now they want to kind of tell their story. So those conversations are, you know, are making way. So everybody's different, you know, every partner's different.
Yeah.
Content selling is, you know, you've got to fight your fight and your justification, and even more so. So, you know, it's I don't know, it's fun.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. And I think it sounds to me throughout this whole discussion today that really the thing, like the kind of central thread through all of it, whether it was messaging, you know, prospecting, sales, upselling, just reaching out to clients, staying connected. There's so much of it all came back to just being authentic and genuinely connecting with people and really paying attention to that human element. And I think that's, you know, such a good summary of this entire topic is how do we go through, you know, the coming months and any challenges we're going to face from that, and really remembering that we're in it together is such a big part of that. So we're running up on time here. We've got about a minute to 2 minutes left. So I'd love to really quickly, high level, but from each of you, is there what's the one thing you would recommend to our listeners today to carry them through the back half of this year once we're out of quarantine? And I will start with Matt.
Good question. No pressure. You know, focus on the fundamentals of what, especially if you're in a sales role, focus on the fundamentals of what made you successful in the first place. Those fundamentals aren't going to be any different than what's going to make you successful over the next 6 to 12 months. It's doing research on your clients, coming up with appropriate tailored messaging that's specific to them. And when you reach out to them, lead in with value, but double down on finding ways to foster human connection from the very beginning.
Perfect. Love that. Kenor, how about you?
I would I would say stay positive. Try to find the silver linings and do the things that feed your soul, because this is going to be over. And the best sales advice I ever got was that they have to buy you before they'll buy your company, before they'll buy your product. And if we walk into rooms and, well, virtual rooms, and don't convey that we believe things will get better, then our clients won't either.
Yeah, absolutely. And Allison, last but not least.
I would just say, I don't know, financially, I would really focus on the back half of the year. You know, second quarter, I feel like a lot of brands and publishers and whatnot are, you know, they're bracing themselves, and there's really more of a focal point on the back half and how they're going to make up for the loss in second quarter. So I would, you know, again, the more proactive that you can be, you know, when you're seeing, just like what Matt said, you're seeing something in the press that a certain brand is doing, comment on it, reach out about it, provide ideas and solutions to help them further that initiative, and just constantly be a source of intel for your partners, so that you know, through this, even though maybe they're not spending right now, if going back to the relationship, if you support them and you help them and you think of that, you know, when it is come time to come back and to put plans together.
Solid advice. That's fantastic. All three of you were fantastic. Thank you, my Buffaloes, for joining the session today and for your great advice. I know everyone appreciates it. I sure appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you everyone who is on.
Thank you,
here.
Kristy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining. That was incredible. You will quickly be kicked over to the next session, really hoping for no more technical difficulties. So we'll see you there soon. Thank you so much.